Christmas is over. What does Snow White, Cinderella, Aurora, Ariel, Belle, Jasmine, Nala, Pocahontas, Tiana, and Rapunzel all have in common? Well, I mean, obviously, they're all the classic Disney princesses that are actually princesses. Mulan is not a princess, and I will die on that hill. Also, yeah, I included Nala. She is a princess. Hashtag respect for Nala. But why them and not later editions like Anna or Vanellope and Moana? Because they also fill what I define as the princess archetype, and the princesses after Rapunzel don't. Now, despite how Hollywood and feminists have turned on these characters, we can't deny that there's something to them, something that speaks to girls' hearts and has for generations. Little girls want to be these characters. They look up to them. They're inspired by them. And a lot of times it takes outside intervention for them to not be anymore. And in my experience, when something has universality to it and staying power like that, it goes much deeper than just girls want a pretty dress and a handsome prince. They also want to talk to animals. But more than that, when something means so much to so many people for so long, there's something much deeper going on. When you first watch Lord of the Rings, it's an exciting and entertaining movie series that succeeds on just every level. And then when you read the book, it's a good story that could probably stand to have a few thousand words cut from it. But then, inexplicably, you start to feel this urge to reread it again. So you do. Then you reread it again. And you decide that you wouldn't cut a single word. The story has incredible, almost absurd levels of depth to it. It's one of those that the more you dig in, the more rewarding it is. And there are people who have devoted their lives to studying those books. That's not the average person, but the average person still really likes those books and movies. And I think they're so popular because the average person, while they have no desire to plumb the depths of the series, they can sense that those depths are there. And that contributes to the immense satisfaction the average person has with those stories. I find that to often be the case. There are a lot of things you suddenly remember loving as a child, but then you revisit them and they're terrible. But those are the ones that you forgot that you loved until something reminded you that they existed at all. But the ones that you kept loving and stuck with you, there's usually a lot more to them than that. For example, Twilight was the biggest thing in the world for almost a decade, but I don't really expect anyone to be passing it on to their children. It'll probably be a distant memory in a few years, for those that didn't watch the Rifftrax version at least. Link in the description, it might be the greatest comedy ever made. Children have loved these Disney stories for decades, and they have faithfully passed them on to their children for generations. So, what gives? I think an answer lies in my princess archetype definition. Maybe it's different in Europe, where you had princesses until fairly recently, but here in America, our imaginations hold princesses to a higher standard than queens. Queens can be evil. A princess should not be. She must be good and virtuous. A queen can be cruel. A princess must be kind. A queen can be ugly. A princess must be beautiful. Queens can be human. Princesses should be angels. But the princess has been given a bad rap recently, sometimes from bad writers, sometimes from people who misunderstand her use. They say she's nothing more than a MacGuffin. I mean, nothing gets a fantasy adventure going like a kidnapped princess. Or she's just a trophy the hero earns for saving the day. Or a mindless love interest. She's helpless, in distress, and in need of rescue. But the well-written princess, the one that stays in our imaginations for centuries, embodies the best of femininity. That's a hard word. Women have two superpowers. The first is you can make people. Like, it's such a common thing about life that I think we forget how amazing it is. You make people. And it's automatic. I'm not saying pregnancy is easy, but there isn't anything specific that you have to do in the process. Your body just makes people. It's one of those things that's so mundane, but it really just gets crazier the more you think about it. But your second superpower is your ability to inspire. We all know about how you can inspire great art, but I don't mean it in a muse way. I mean it in a much, much more far-reaching sense. Women, by being women, have bettered the world in ways that cannot be quantified, and Disney princesses across the board do a great job of visualizing that. So let's look at the grandmother of them all, Snow White. The criticism of Snow White is she's a pushover. She does nothing to contribute to her rescue, but that's not true. You see, the princess archetype is a woman who is so good that just by being good, she changes the world around her, and that leads to her salvation. And by the way, I don't mean good as in she's such a good girl. I mean it like Mr. Beaver does.
Of course he isn't safe, but he's good.
Snow White is a young woman who is unjustly forced into servitude. A diamond intentionally buried in a fireplace. Should she be angry? Yes. Should she be bitter? Yes. Would she be justified in despairing? Absolutely. Does she do any of those things? No. Snow White remains hopeful and kind and cheerful in her circumstances. Maintaining those characteristics takes a lot of work. It is not easy. It takes an inner strength to stay good against adversity. In her envy of Snow White, the evil queen, which Disney, you know what's really unforgivable about your Snow White remake? You had the opportunity to finally give this character a name, and you couldn't even give us that!
They've never given me a name. I've been around since show 1, and I still don't have a name.
I'm just going to call her Janet. So Janet tells a huntsman to kill Snow White while she's picking wildflowers. It is clarified throughout that everyone is scared of Janet. The huntsman tries to object, but he is clearly not willing to stand up to her until he's confronted by Snow White. I mean, really, he had no chance. She's a lovely, innocent girl who stopped picking wildflowers to give a baby bird a pep talk. Confronted by that, he just couldn't do it. But it goes beyond that. Snow White inspires him. He was so scared of Janet that he considered killing Snow White, but now she's given him enough courage to not only defy Janet, but to lie to her. Cut forward to the dwarves. They are also scared of Janet. They consider tossing Snow White out from that fear, but faced by the goodness of Snow White, they're powerless. She changes them, most notably Grumpy. She more than inspires Grumpy, she infects him. He smiles now, and he opens his misogynistic heart to her, but now it's even broader. See, Janet is evil. And evil rulers need to be deposed, but they're very difficult to. And we have these dwarves that I'm not positive people know that they're even there, and they are okay with that.
They hide in their mountains seeking riches. They care nothing for the troubles of others.
But when faced with Snow White being in danger, those dwarves step up. They're not scared anymore. They're willing to die to see justice done, and they're ready to act out their righteous fury. This is the terrifying face of a kind-hearted man ready to cave Janet's head in with a rock. Janet is defeated. Through the inspiration of Snow White's goodness, the kingdom was freed from tyranny. Ariel is the weakest of the princesses, character-wise, in my opinion, because, like a lot of the princesses, she doesn't grow as a character, but she kind of needs to. There's a couple of lessons Ariel could stand to learn, but that's not my point. The point is that Ariel is in a broken world, particularly in regards to her father. He's a speciest. I made that term up for a book in high school. It applies here, I think. I used it for aliens. Anyway, Triton hates humans because they're humans. Also because they eat fish, which has always made me wonder what Triton eats. But what happens? Ariel strongly stands for the fact that humanity isn't all bad and she refuses to move. That's a commonality in these stories, the strength to stand firm. Her willingness to give up everything for her love of humanity changes her father's heart, and it ends up building a union between the land and the sea. She changes things by being good. Belle is probably the strongest example of this. She tames a beast simply by being good and being courageous in her goodness. The beast is cursed to stay a beast unless he can learn to love another and earn her love in return. And he doesn't think it's possible. Until this moment. He can't comprehend that kind of love. He's never seen it before. Also, side note, you want to know the real tragedy of the Beauty and the Beast story as presented in Disney? The curse is if he could learn to love another and earn her love in return. It's the same twist as Penelope. All that had to happen is he could have learned to love one of his servants and they love him back, and the curse would have been broken. It didn't happen. It's kind of sad when you think about it. But her capacity to love, to be kind, her goodness, it inspires him to change, to think change is possible, and it works. Belle saves the entire castle by being good. Nala comes to Simba when he's just a lazy, immature punk, and he's no match for her goodness. She knows what is right, and she calls him out on it. She reminds him of who he was and who he could be, and it makes him change and accept his responsibility. Pocahontas holds to the belief that these two peoples can live in harmony. She believes in good, and she holds to that belief, even being willing to die for that belief, and it changes the hearts of everyone around her. Tiana has her ideals of hard work and doing the right thing, and it changes Naveen and potentially all of Maldonia. When Flynn Rider meets Rapunzel, he's selfish and only cares about himself and material gain. But she is so selfless and loves life so much that she makes him care for others to the point of death, and he starts to enjoy the world around him because she's good. Cinderella is interesting because of where her inspiration lies. Her adversity is the same as Snow White's, but just cranked up to 11. The emotional abuse this poor girl suffers makes it amazing she's not Lizzie Borden, much less still a good person at all. But who is it that she inspires? Well, there's a subplot in Cinderella that honestly deserves more respect than it gets, and that is the adventures of her mouse friends. The mice live in terror of Rucife, the cat, and are constantly just barely surviving his attempts to eat them. To them, he is evil incarnate. Jacques is one mouse who is braver than the others. He's honestly Disney's most underrated hero. This mouse is a boss on par with Merryweather, and he deserves your respect. Anyway, he is the only mouse who intentionally interacts with Rucife, but it's always under the same circumstances. Rucife is between the mice and something they need, so Jacques gets Rucife's attention and runs as fast as he can to get away as a distraction. But then his beloved Cinderella is locked in her room by Lady Tremaine, and he is determined to free her. This leads to the only time the mice aren't anywhere near the other humans, implying that this is something they don't normally risk. But for Cinderella, their princess, they'll do anything. Then, when they've almost brought the key to Cinderella, Rucife strikes and traps Gus, and now, faced with rescuing his princess, Jacques, without hesitation, grabs Rucife's tail and bites him. For the first time, he is willing to fight the cat. And not just him, the other mice who we've never even seen face Rucife try to attack him. Are the mice just kind and brave and probably willing to do that for anyone facing injustice? No. They're doing it because Cinderella is goodness personified, and they are willing to die for her. Furthermore, her goodness made her beautiful inside and out. If she had allowed herself to become bitter and angry, well, the fairy godmother wouldn't have shown up.
If you'd lost all your faith, I couldn't be here. And here I am.
But the prince wouldn't have fallen in love with her at first sight, leading to her freedom even if she did. She may seem passive, but again, staying good when the world is beating you up over and over and over again takes incredible strength. And that perseverance is why she was rescued from her miserable life. Even the Grand Duke looked ready to marry her when she came down the stairs. Aurora is a very interesting study in this. Again, going way back to one of my early videos, Sleeping Beauty is not about Aurora. It's about the three good fairies. The kingdom they live in is subject to the whims of Maleficent, the evil sorceress/demon. She curses a princess to die because it's fun. The fairies appear to be the only other magic users in the area, but they're terrified of Maleficent. The only help that they can give is small, sneaky maneuvers to frustrate her, but stop her. Oh no. Until the three fairies raise Aurora. She becomes their daughter. They love her with everything in them. And when things go wrong, and it's the only way to save their princess and their daughter, now they're willing to face Big M. Aurora inspires them to finally step up and fight. Jasmine is probably the most applicable to real life. You see, Aladdin is a loser. He's a thief who talks to his monkey about how one day he's going to be rich, but he's really just floating through life. I mean, he's an able-bodied young man. Why doesn't he have a job? I'm legitimately asking. But then he meets a princess, and she inspires him to be more. He actually starts trying to better himself because of her goodness. Ladies, this is a power you have. The number of guys I know who have gotten their life together just because they wanted one specific girl to date them and saw it as necessary to get her to say yes, it's more than half of the guys that I know that are married. Whether or not the girl thinks that this change was necessary is totally irrelevant. He looks at himself and decides he doesn't deserve to be with her, so he tries to change that. I was waiting tables and working on my novel, but as soon as I knew I wanted to marry my wife, I started thinking about what kind of a career I could pursue. The princess archetype serves two purposes in storytelling, and both are something that little girls find inspiring, even though they usually can't articulate that's what it is. As the great philosopher Samwise Gamgee once said,
"There's some good in this world, Mr. Frodo, and it's worth fighting for."
Princesses are often the physical embodiment of that good. Girls say they want a handsome prince or a brave knight, but it comes down to more than just wanting a man to solve their problems, because these princesses have to earn their happy endings by being strong. The aspiration is that they want to be so good that men are willing to fight evil just because they're in the world. Compare the Beast before Belle comes back to after. He starts completely unwilling to fight. He has nothing to live for and nothing to fight for. If whether or not he lives doesn't matter, why bother fighting evil? But once she returns, he has a reason to fight, and fight he does. Gaston was feeling cocky, and then the Beast absolutely wipes the floor with him without breaking a sweat. He fought off a pack of wolves. One dude with a club isn't a problem. The second purpose of the princess is it makes men better. The mistake comes from calling the princess a trophy, a prize for a job well done. So I'm gonna have to try to be careful about how I word this. The princess is often seen as a jewel among women, the most beautiful, the most kind, the embodiment of the good. It's not that people look at the hero's deeds and say, how can we ever repay you? How about this beautiful woman we have on hand? Will you accept that? No. This is the greatest of women. By killing the dragon, you have proven yourself to be the greatest of men, and we collectively agree that you have earned the right to be loved by her, and no one else has. That's the more epic version, but there's also what I mentioned with Aladdin. Women inspire men to be better men because we know that's what you deserve. Girls see Aladdin, the free-spirited street rat, going back to Agrabah to fight Jafar, the beast putting on a suit, Jacques biting Rusafi's tail, the dwarves riding into battle, Han Solo returning to help destroy the Death Star. I think George Lucas didn't make Leia a princess for specific reasons. And they think, I want to be so good that men become better because of me. A princess inspires men to be stronger, more refined, controlled, responsible, smart, learned, aware, romantic, creative, just more. A princess turns a farm boy into a knight into a prince into a king, and a thief into a hero. An example of a princess grown into a queen who knows her power and uses it is Queen Eleanor from Brave. The men are being absolute barbarians, not a woman in sight, absolute chaos. And she walks in without an ounce of fear, striding through the room without a word, and her very presence stops the fighting because they know their behavior is unacceptable in her presence, and that is enough to make them stop. There was a British missionary named Gladys Aylward. Most of what I know about her came from the movie The End of the Sixth Happiness. In 1930, at 28, she decided God had called her to be a missionary to China. At the time, England had the largest missionary organization in the world, but they looked at her and said she couldn't handle it. Well, what did they know? She took all of her savings and traveled to China by herself. She worked with an already established missionary for a little while, but eventually it was just her. She was so well known that people didn't call her Gladys. They called her a name that I'm not going to try to pronounce that meant the virtuous one. The reason I bring her up is there was a prison riot in the town that she was in. Inmates were literally killing each other, and she asked to be allowed in by herself because no guards would accompany her because they were so scared. She walked in unarmed, and the prisoners stopped the riots and listened to her instructions because she was so good that they had no desire to hurt her. The woman was an absolute boss. This is in the movie, so I don't know if it's accurate, but one of those prisoners became extremely devoted to her. A few years later, she and he single-handedly led over 100 orphans on foot over the mountains to safety during the Japanese invasion. This prisoner who had devoted himself to her protection sacrificed himself to lead a group of Japanese scouts in the wrong direction. Her goodness turned a criminal into a knight. That is the power of the Disney princess, the fairy tale princess. The power to make the world a better place through strength of character and beauty of soul. Refuse to give in to the darkness. Always be a light. That is the lesson that has stuck with us for so long through these characters. You'll see me next time if you subscribe. Bye. Oh, and just to clarify, I do know that the cat's name was actually Lucifer, not Rusafi.